In this video I'm going to show you how you can do simple custom quilting using line pattern with IQ. I'm working on this Milky Way quilt. I could have just done an all over, but I wanted it to look more custom than that because I wanted to highlight the pinwheel designs, this one and then this one. So I was trying to think how I could make it continuous, so I could do a whole row in one pass with one start and stop. And I figured out by looking at the design, if I went from this corner to this corner, stitching a design in here, ending here, then I could continuously carry on and stitch in this star, carry on to here, and so on. So I'm going to kind of go diagonally across the stars, which means I can do the whole row. Now my next problem was, well, what design do I want to do? So at that point I drew up a couple of, I drew the outline of the block, the pinwheel star block, and then I drew some designs in, and I decided I would do this feather design. So looking at that, you can in here, it stitches this, then it'll stitch down here, then it'll stitch this, then it'll stitch this, and it'll exit there. And then the next one will start, so it will be a continuous design. So then I thought, well, I'm going to make this now, so I'm going to record this design. But looking at it, it's 4 parts that are almost identical, so all I needed to record was this one arm of the pinwheel. So that's what I did. I actually marked that on my quilt and stitched this out and recorded it as I stitched. So then here up on the screen you can see my recordings. This one is my raw recording. I didn't like the spine, so I recorded just the spine again, and then I cleaned up the pattern. This was all that I recorded, and I cleaned it up using smooth, and I think I traced over it with line pattern to make sure it really was smooth. And then I just combined 4 of the arms together. 2 of them I made with a little tab on them so that they would, you know, that would exit and enter the star pattern there, and the other 2 are just plain. So that was my design. Okay, so now we'll go back out of here, and you can see on this screen that I've already done 3 rows. This is what the design looks like stitched out, which is pretty pleasing. So each pinwheel star has got that little motif in it, and it just looks a little bit more special than an all over. But it's very simple because it all stitches in one pass for each row. So I'm ready to stitch my next row. I'll put my papers out of the way. And the first thing I'm going to do is mark the first block, just so I've got a guide as to how large the pattern needs to be. So, put my glasses on. I'm moving the machine over here to the edge of the quilt. I might as well start at the edge. I'm going to go add edit block, add block, standard block, mark on quilt. And I'm just moving around the block, just touching each corner. I don't have to be exact because I created the pattern to be a bit forgiving. It doesn't go right out to the seam lines, which allows for a little variation in the piecing. So I'm just going to mark each corner of this block. Okay, okay, okay. Okay, I'm looking down my needle and putting it over the corners. Oops, that one didn't beep. Again, did. The beginning. Okay, so I'm finished. Do you want to add another block? No. So there's my new block on the screen. Alright, so now I'm going to add my pattern. So I'm going to go add edit pattern, add pattern, line pattern, and I'm going to go to my catalogue to get my continuous Milky Way pinwheel catalogue. Alright, Milky Way, here it is, Milky Way complete, continuous, continue. Okay, so now I'm looking at my quilt and I can see I need to start here and go across to here. So I'm going to put my needle over here at the start point, hit OK, and I'm going to bring the machine across to here. And now I'm looking at my pattern on the screen, and let's zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to change the pattern height so that it fills the whole design. So I touched pattern height and I'm just going to drag it. I'm just looking at the design to see when I like it. Alright, that looks pretty good. Doesn't cross the seam lines anywhere. It gives me a little bit of wiggle room. So if all these stars aren't quite the same, it doesn't matter. Okay, I like that. Let's see a little bit bigger. Maybe there. Okay, that's good. So I'm going to hit OK. So I'm going to go diagonally across the other star up to here. I'm going to pan over so I can see my next star. There's the next one on the screen. I like it. I'm going to hit OK. Now I'm going to come diagonally this way. Again, pan over. Okay. Now I'm going to go diagonally this way. Just looking at how the pattern goes. That's correct. Okay. Across here. Let's pan over a bit. Okay. Now I discovered on the first few rows that by the time I got to about here, the quilt had drawn up a little bit. So although I marked the intersection of the piecing, it actually stopped a little bit short of the piecing where it should do. So for the rest of the quilt, I'm going to mark my point a little bit to the left of the actual intersection of the piecing so that when it stitches, it'll go to the correct place. So we'll go across here first. Okay, and then down here, and this is one where I'm going to come over a little bit to the left of the actual intersection. Okay, now I'm going up here. This one down here. This one up here. And the last one down here. Okay, finished. Let's have a look at the whole thing. I'll come back. Let's zoom out. Ooh, out. Pan over, and you can see the whole row is in place. And now IQ will stitch that as one continuous design. Before I set it doing that, I will point out that I actually did some ditch work before I started, before I was sewing this. The first row I didn't do any in the ditch, and I felt that it just looked better with the ditch work. But you know, if you're doing some custom quilting and if you do ditch work, it puts it into a higher price point, then forget the ditch work, just do this. So I'm going to move the machine back over to the left side and we'll start it stitching. Sew quilt, select the first pattern to quilt, the one I've just marked, continue, sew quilt. First stitch to bring it up, hold my threads, continue, start. I've been having a little bit of trouble with this thread breaking, so hopefully it won't break right away. Now, because this is a recorded design, it's not absolutely perfect like one that had been digitized. It's got a little character to it, if you like. it looks like the way I would have quilted it freehand. But the nice thing is that IQ's doing all the work here, but it's still my style of quilting. I've got it going at a fairly conservative speed because I want it to be accurate. Plus, with my thread breakage issues, going a bit slower is better for this thread. Oh, it just broke, so there we go. I'll come back later. Okay, I've rethreaded my machine. I pulled up the bobbin thread and cut it. I'll show you what to do now, how to restart after your thread breaks. When the thread broke, I couldn't move the machine. There was a button down here that said restart. So I touched that and that just releases the machine so that you can cut the threads and what have you. So now the message on the screen says move the needle to the restart location and touch OK. So I'm looking at my quilt and I'm moving my needle. I'm going to make the stitching overlap a little bit. And I'm just lowering my needle a little bit there so I can see. That's where I want to start. Now I'm going to look up on my screen, and it's important that I look at this arrow because this is a double stitched line. I want the arrow to be going in that direction. If I move my machine ever so slightly, you should see it switch. The arrow switched to the other direction. I don't want that. I need it to be going this direction. So let's move the machine back. Okay, there. That's what I want. So I'm holding my machine and I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to watch that because those lines are right on top of each other. Sometimes when you hit OK, the machine can move slightly and then it'll stitch on the wrong line. So I'm just going to hold it steady as I hit OK. IQ took the stitch to bring up the bobbin thread. I'm going to hold the ends tight, hit start. Okay, we'll let it finish the row, and when it's done we'll come back and you can see the completed row. Okay, I've finished that whole row. It took about 25 minutes, I guess, to stitch that whole row. This is I've got the quilt mounted lengthwise, so this is the length of the quilt. Like I said, I had it going fairly slowly. 1.5 and 1.1 was the speed. I just wanted to point out here where I marked, when I came and did the line pattern, I marked right on that intersection, but you can see it stopped short. That's simply because the fabric had shifted slightly this way with the stitching. So when I went over to here to mark the next one, I actually marked the intersection about here, a little bit to the left, and that hit right on the intersection then. It didn't happen up here, because this fabric was more stable. It had already been stitched, so it wasn't going to shift like it did down here. Now the other thing I want to point out is is right here. You can see how these feathers don't come down to the spine. That's not fabric movement. That's in the pattern, and that's just the way I stitched it. And I left it like that because, well, that's the way I stitched it. You can see here too the same. Now some of them, like over here, they do meet. So it was just a variation in how I cleaned up the pattern and how I wanted it to be. So there you go, using line pattern for simple custom quilting. I think that looks a lot nicer than just an edge to edge. Now here's a little reward for those of you who've watched this video all the way through. I'm going to put this design in the files section of the IQ Yahoo forum. You'll find it there. It's called Milky Way.